I'm Audrey, 32, and last January, I received an $8.100 invoice from my parents after they excluded me from Christmas dinner. My entire life, I've watched them worship my younger brother while I remained invisible despite my successes. The certified letter demanding money for a trip I wasn't invited to was the final straw. After years of swallowing my pain, I finally found my voice. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my family, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens when someone who's been invisible their whole life finally makes themselves seen. Growing up in suburban Boston, I always felt like an afterthought in my own family. The signs were subtle at first, but by the time I was 10, the pattern was unmistakable. My brother Marcus, who's 3 years younger than me, was the golden child from the moment he kicked his first soccer ball. My parents, Richard and Patricia Walker, built their lives around Marcus's sports schedule. Our weekends revolved around his games tournaments and practice sessions. Dad coached his teams, and Mom was the enthusiastic team manager who organized snacks and carpools. They'd cheer wildly from the sidelines, taking videos and photos that would later be framed and displayed prominently throughout our house. Meanwhile, I was the quiet girl with her nose in books. When I brought home straight A's, my report card would get a cursory glance and maybe a distracted "Good job, honey," before the conversation shifted back to Marcus's upcoming tournament. The walls of our home were a shrine to his athletic achievements. Trophies, medals, and team photos dominated every surface. My academic certificates and art contest ribbons were tucked away in a drawer or haphazardly stuck to the refrigerator until they fell off and disappeared. "Marcus has natural talent," my father would boast to anyone who would listen. "He's going places." I'd stand in the background, invisible, wondering what I needed to do to earn that same pride in his voice when he spoke about me. In high school, I threw myself into every activity I could manage. I joined the debate team, edited the school newspaper, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and maintained a 4.0 GPA. I thought if I just achieved enough, they'd finally see me. The night I was awarded Student of the Year, neither of my parents attended the ceremony. Marcus had a regional soccer match that ran late, and that was that. "We're so sorry we missed it, Audrey," Mom said the next morning, not looking up from packing Marcus's lunch. "Next time give us more notice, okay? You know how busy things get with Marcus's schedule." College was the first time I felt truly free. I chose Northwestern University in Chicago, partly for its excellent communications program, but mostly for the 850 miles it put between me and my family. Unlike Marcus, who had a college fund that my parents had been building since his birth, I pieced together scholarships, loans, and part-time jobs to pay my way. When I called home during freshman year, struggling to balance work and studies, my mother said, "Everyone goes through this, Audrey. You'll figure it out." 2 weeks later, they flew to Arizona to watch Marcus play in a showcase tournament, staying at a resort, and posting dozens of photos on social media. After graduation, I built a career in graphic design, steadily climbing from junior designer to creative director at a respected Chicago agency. Each promotion came with congratulatory messages from friends, colleagues, and even distant acquaintances. My parents' response to my biggest promotion was a text that read, "That's nice. Did you see Marcus got selected for the regional all-star team?" He was 25 and playing in an amateur soccer league while still living in my parents' basement. I built my own support network in Chicago. My friends became my chosen family. Grace, who I met at my first job, and Lisa, my neighbor turned best friend, were the ones who celebrated my victories and held me through my disappointments. They were the ones who noticed when I achieved something significant, who remembered my birthday without being reminded, who showed up when I needed support. Still, every holiday season I'd board a plane to Boston, bearing expensive gifts, and hoping this would be the year things changed. Each time I'd sit at the dinner table while conversation flowed around me, not through me. I'd watch my mother serve Marcus's favorite dishes, while the vegetables I preferred were overcooked as an afterthought. I'd listen as my father asked Marcus detailed questions about his life, while barely inquiring about mine beyond housework. One Christmas, I announced I'd won a national design award that included a feature in a prestigious industry magazine. My father nodded absently, then immediately turned to Marcus and asked about his recreational soccer team's latest game. My mother patted my hand and said, "That's nice, dear," before getting up to refill Marcus's plate. I kept trying year after year, bringing thoughtful gifts that often went unacknowledged. The Christmas before last, I spent 2 months' worth of savings on a vintage watch for my father, similar to one his father had owned. He opened it, said thanks, and set it aside. Later that day, when Marcus gave him a signed jersey from a local sports team, my father hugged him and declared it the best gift ever. The watch remained in its box unworn. Despite everything, I kept showing up, kept trying, kept hoping something would change. I realize now I was stuck in a cycle of seeking validation from people who had demonstrated repeatedly that they were incapable of giving it. Last November, as Thanksgiving wound down, I started wondering about Christmas plans. Typically, my mother would mention something about seeing you at Christmas as I was leaving their house after Thanksgiving dinner. This time, she said nothing. I waited a week, then called her. "So, what's the plan for Christmas this year?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh," she paused, her voice taking on that slightly higher pitch it gets when she's uncomfortable. "We haven't really figured everything out yet. It's all up in the air." "No problem," I said. "Just let me know soon so I can book my flight before prices go up." "Actually, Audrey," she said, "your father and I were thinking of doing something different this year. A change of scenery might be nice." "That sounds fun," I replied. "Where are you thinking I can meet you there instead of Boston?" Another pause. "Well, it's just that Marcus has been working so hard lately, and we thought he could use a real vacation. Something special, you know." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, but the invitation never came. She talked around it, mentioning family time and just the break Marcus needs, but never explicitly saying I wasn't invited. I hung up with a vague sense of unease, but told myself I was overreacting. Surely they wouldn't exclude me from Christmas entirely. Days passed, then weeks. No invitation came. I sent a text to my mother in early December. "Should I be looking at flights for the 23rd or 24th? She responded hours later. "Let's talk after the holidays. Things are so hectic right now." It was on the 15th of December, 10 days before Christmas, that I saw the Instagram post. My cousin Jamie had shared a photo of my parents and Marcus at the airport, luggage piled around them. The caption read, "Bon voyage to the Walkers. Enjoy Aspen." My stomach dropped. I immediately texted Jamie, "Are Mom, Dad, and Marcus going to Aspen for Christmas?" Jamie's response came quickly. "Oh no, was I not supposed to post that? Yes, they're doing Christmas at that fancy ski resort this year. The Pinnacle. I think your dad said Marcus has been dying to try snowboarding." "Did they mention me going?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I assumed you couldn't get the time off work or something," Jamie replied. Then after a moment, "Oh, Audrey, I'm so sorry. You didn't know, did you?" The realization that I had been deliberately excluded hit me like a physical blow. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, and felt the hurt transform into something harder, something like anger, but colder. They hadn't even had the decency to tell me directly. Later that day, scrolling through my father's rarely updated Facebook page, I found more photos. Not just my parents and Marcus, but Marcus's girlfriend Brittany was there too. In one picture, they were all holding up champagne glasses in what looked like a luxury suite, with a Christmas tree twinkling in the background. The caption read, "Family Christmas Vacation Begins." I called Grace immediately, my voice shaking as I explained what had happened. "Audrey, this is beyond messed up," she said, outrage clear in her voice. "You need to call them out on this." "What would be the point?" I asked. "They'll just say there was a misunderstanding, or that they thought I was too busy with work." "Because they need to know that this isn't okay," Grace insisted. "They can't just pretend you don't exist when it's convenient for them." But I knew from experience how these confrontations went. My parents were masters of gaslighting, making me feel like I was overreacting or misinterpreting the situation. My father would get defensive and dismissive, while my mother would become tearful, claiming I was hurting her by suggesting she didn't love both her children equally. Instead of calling them, I threw myself into alternative Christmas plans. My friend Lisa was hosting a Christmas Eve dinner for friends who weren't traveling home. Grace invited me to her family's Christmas Day celebration. I said yes to both, determined to surround myself with people who actually wanted me around. Lisa's dinner was warm and lively, with mismatched chairs pulled up to a table overflowing with food and wine. We played board games and exchanged small gifts, laughing until well past midnight. At Grace's family home, I was welcomed like an old friend. Her mother hugged me tightly and made sure I had seconds of everything. Her father insisted I take the comfortable chair by the fire. Her brothers included me in their traditional Christmas movie marathon. It was lovely, it was kind, it was everything Christmas should be. And underneath it all, despite my best efforts, there was a persistent ache. These people were wonderful, but they weren't my family. The fact that my own parents hadn't wanted me at their Christmas celebrations still stung, no matter how I tried to rationalize it. After the holidays, I fell into a mild depression. I went through the motions at work but found little joy in projects that would normally excite me. I declined social invitations, preferring to come home and lose myself in streaming services. I kept checking my phone, half expecting some explanation from my parents, but none came. Their social media accounts continued to fill with photos from their perfect family vacation in Aspen, each one a fresh paper cut on my already wounded heart. The 18th of January, a Wednesday. I remember because I had just presented a new campaign to a client and was feeling cautiously optimistic about their response. When I got home, there was a notice of a certified letter waiting for me. I'd have to go to the post office to pick it up. Curious and slightly concerned, I went the next morning before work. The return address was my parents' home in Boston. My first thought was that maybe this was their way of reaching out, perhaps with an explanation or even an apology for the Christmas exclusion. I opened it while still in the post office. Inside was what looked like an official invoice, complete with an itemized list of expenses, and a total at the bottom, $8.100. The letterhead read Walker Family Expenses, and the description said, Family Contribution, Aspen Christmas Vacation. The breakdown was meticulous. Accommodation at the Pinnacle Resort, $3.2001, 4-share a family suite, ski passes $1.200, group ski lessons $800, Christmas dinner at Alpine Restaurant $350, flights $1.100, airport transfers $250, spending money contribution $1.200. At the bottom was a handwritten note from my father, Audrey. As you know, family responsibilities must be shared equally. Marcus is going through a career transition and couldn't contribute his portion this year. We've covered his share but need you to reimburse your portion promptly. The trip was a necessary break for the family after a stressful year. I stood frozen in the middle of the post office, reading and rereading the note, trying to make sense of it. They hadn't invited me to Christmas, had gone on a luxury vacation without me, and were now billing me for a quarter of the cost. It was so absurd that for a brief moment, I wondered if it was some kind of twisted joke. It wasn't. The initial shock gave way to a simmering anger that built with each passing minute. By the time I got to work, I was so distracted that I had to lock myself in a conference room to calm down. Instead, I called my mother. I got the invoice, I said when she answered, not bothering with a greeting. Oh, good, she replied, as if we were discussing a birthday card I'd received. Your father was wondering if it had arrived yet. Mom, why am I being asked to pay for a trip I wasn't even invited to? There was a pause then. What do you mean you weren't invited? We just assumed you wouldn't want to come. Assumed. Based on what? When did anyone ask me if I wanted to go to Aspen for Christmas? Well, you're always so busy with your work, Audrey. And you know how much Marcus needed this break. He's been having such a hard time lately. So you excluded me from a family Christmas, and now you're asking me to pay for it. I could hear my voice rising and took a deep breath. We didn't exclude you, she said, her tone taking on the wounded quality I knew so well. We just made other arrangements this year. And as for the money, well, we've always divided family expenses equally. What family expenses have we ever divided equally? I paid my own way through college while you and Dad covered everything for Marcus. I buy my own plane tickets to visit every year. I even paid for my own hotel room at Aunt Barbara's wedding because you said there wasn't room in the family suite, which somehow had space for Marcus and his girlfriend at the time. That's different, Audrey. And honestly, I don't appreciate your tone. Your brother has struggled in ways you haven't, too, Your life has been easy. Easy. The word hit me like a slap. My easy life of working through college, of building a career from scratch without family connections or support, of piecing together holidays with friends because my family made it clear I was an afterthought. The conversation continued in this vein, with my mother alternating between defensive justifications and emotional manipulation. By the end, she was sniffling into the phone about how I always misunderstood and how hard it was to have a daughter who was so sensitive. This wasn't the first time they'd made financial demands related to Marcus. 3 years ago, my father called to inform me that they were consolidating family resources to help Marcus start a small business, a sports training facility that he'd been dreaming about for years. The implication was clear: I was expected to contribute. When I hesitantly asked how much they were thinking, my father named a sum that represented nearly half of my savings at the time. When I explained that I couldn't afford that much, he said, "I thought you were doing well in your career, Audrey. Family supports family." I ended up sending what I could, about a third of what they'd asked for. Marcus's business venture lasted less than a year before he lost interest and moved on to another idea. No one ever mentioned my contribution again or offered to return any portion of it. There was also the time they called asking if I could temporarily cover Marcus's car insurance after he had 2 at-fault accidents in 1 year and his rates skyrocketed. The temporary arrangement lasted 18 months before I finally put my foot down. After hanging up with my mother, I sat in the conference room feeling drained and confused. The pattern was so clear from the outside, but I'd been entangled in it for so long that I'd normalized it. I called my therapist, Dr. Reynolds, and asked if she had any emergency openings that day. Sitting in her office that evening, I showed her the invoice. "What do you think this is really about, Audrey?" she asked after examining it. "Money, obviously," I said. "They want me to subsidize their golden child as usual." "Yes, there's the financial aspect," she acknowledged. "But I'm also seeing a family system that doesn't respect your boundaries, that takes your participation for granted, while simultaneously excluding you from full membership." "So what do I do?" "That depends on what you want the outcome to be," she replied. "Are you looking to maintain the relationship as it is? Are you hoping for recognition and change? Or are you reaching a point where you need to protect yourself regardless of their response?" Those questions stayed with me long after our session ended. What did I want? What was I willing to accept? And most importantly, what was I going to do about this invoice that represented so much more than just an unpaid bill? The week after receiving the invoice was one of the darkest I can remember. I found myself unable to sleep, replaying childhood memories on an endless loop. The time I won the state art competition and neither parent attended the ceremony because Marcus had a soccer practice, not even a game, just a practice. The 8th grade science fair, where my project on renewable energy won first place, and my father's only comment was, "Isn't this a bit advanced for you?" My high school graduation, where they arrived late and left early because Marcus had a summer league game that evening. My college graduation, where they sat in the audience looking bored until it was over, then immediately started talking about how Marcus was being scouted by semi-professional teams. The job promotions they barely acknowledged. The design awards that earned a perfunctory, "That's nice, dear." The times I was sick or injured and had to rely on friends for help because my family was busy with Marcus's activities. One memory hit particularly hard when I was 26. I had to have an emergency appendectomy. I was living in Chicago, and when I called my parents from the hospital, my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad. We can't really come out there right now, though. Marcus has a big tournament this weekend, and your father is helping him prepare. No one from my family visited me during my recovery." Grace took time off work to help me get home from the hospital and stayed on my couch for 3 days to make sure I was okay. I started making lists, a habit I fall into when I'm trying to make sense of chaos. I listed every major life event where my parents had been absent or indifferent. I calculated the approximate financial support they had given Marcus over the years versus what they had given me. I wrote down every instance I could remember of being expected to give but not receive, to understand but not be understood, to accommodate but never be accommodated. The evidence was overwhelming and heartbreaking. I had been the family scapegoat and Marcus the golden child for as long as I could remember. What's worse, I had been an active participant in this dynamic, constantly seeking approval that never came, making excuses for their behavior and blaming myself for not being enough. I researched family scapegoat dynamics and found myself checking off almost every box, being held to a different standard than siblings, having achievements minimized or ignored, being blamed for family problems, receiving less financial and emotional support, being expected to be independent while siblings are enabled, having personal boundaries ignored or dismissed, being labeled as too sensitive or difficult when expressing needs. Lisa came over one evening and found me surrounded by these lists and research articles. "Audrey," she said gently, sitting beside me, "I've watched this pattern for years and it breaks my heart. You keep throwing yourself against the same wall, hoping it will turn into a door. I just thought if I achieved enough, proved my worth enough, they'd finally see me," I whispered. "From where I'm standing," Lisa said, "you're the most competent, caring, accomplished person I know. If they can't see your worth, that's about them, not you." Something clicked in that moment. A realization that felt like waking up. I don't have to participate in my own erasure. I don't have to accept being simultaneously excluded and exploited. I don't have to keep seeking validation from people who have shown me repeatedly that they are unwilling or unable to give it. The fear of cutting ties with my family had always held me back. What would it say about me if I couldn't even maintain a relationship with my own parents? What would happen at weddings, funerals, family reunions? Would I regret it later when they were gone? But as I sat there surrounded by the evidence of decades of emotional neglect, I realized I was already grieving. I was grieving the parents. I never had the family support. I never received the childhood validation I never experienced. Whether I maintained contact with them or not, that grief would remain. The question was whether I would continue to add to it by subjecting myself to more of the same treatment. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider what it would mean to detach from the outcome. What if I stopped caring whether they approved of me or not? What if I stopped trying to earn my place in a family that had demonstrated I would always be on the outside? What if I responded to this invoice based on what I knew to be right, rather than on what might finally win their approval? I felt something shift inside me, a weight lifting. The status quo was no longer acceptable. I was done being the family ATM while also being treated as an afterthought. I was done with the one-way relationship where I gave and they took. I was done waiting for recognition that would never come. It was time to respond to the invoice, not from a place of hurt or anger, but from a place of clarity and self-respect. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be complicit in my own diminishment. I decided to take a week to carefully plan my response. This wasn't about reacting emotionally, though I certainly had plenty of emotions about the situation. This was about taking a stand for myself in a way that was clear, dignified, and true to my values. First, I consulted with my closest friends about what healthy boundaries would look like in this situation. Grace, always the pragmatist, suggested I should simply decline to pay and clearly state my reasons. Lisa thought I should use this as an opportunity to address the larger pattern, not just this specific incident. My friend Michael, who had gone through something similar with his own family, advised me to prepare for significant backlash and make sure I had support in place. As I was considering these perspectives, I remembered something concerning. Years ago, when I first moved to Chicago, my parents had convinced me to add them to one of my credit card accounts in case of emergencies. At the time, it had seemed like a reasonable precaution, a way for them to help if something happened to me in a city far from home. I logged into my account and was shocked to discover several recent charges I didn't recognize. Restaurant bills in Boston, a gas station near their home, a department store purchase. They had been using my credit card without my knowledge or permission. This discovery prompted me to meet with a financial advisor to completely separate my finances from my family. I closed the joint credit card account and opened a new one solely in my name. I reviewed all my accounts, changed passwords, and removed my parents as emergency contacts on several services. I updated my will, which had named my parents as beneficiaries, to instead direct my assets to a few close friends and some charities I supported. Then came the hardest part, crafting my response to the invoice. I sat down to write a letter, and found myself pouring out decades of hurt and frustration. The first draft was 17 pages long, a detailed accounting of every slight, every disappointment, every instance of favoritism I could remember. It was cathartic to write, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to send. The second draft was shorter, but still too emotional, too desperate to be understood. The third was cold and formal reading, like a legal document rather than a communication between family members. Finally, after nearly a week of drafting and redrafting, I settled on simplicity. I would let a small action speak volumes. I wrote a check for $1. On the memo line, I wrote final family payment. I included a brief note on a plain white card that read simply, "Santa skipped me too." Then, because I wanted them to understand exactly what they had been doing all these years, I included a small envelope containing family photos from over the years. In each one, I was either cropped out, blurred, or standing on the periphery while my parents and Marcus occupied the center. I didn't need to write a caption. The pattern was unmistakable once the photos were viewed together. As a final touch, I created a simple timeline, documenting the pattern of exclusion with specific dates and events where possible. No emotional language, just facts. 1,999 parents missed Student of the Year ceremony for Marcus's soccer game. 2005 college graduation. N. Parents arrived late, left early for Marcus's game. 2010 hospital stay after appendectomy. No family visited. 2015 National Design Award. No acknowledgement. 2019 contribution to Marcus's business requested $15,000. 2021 car insurance payments for Marcus, 18 months. 2022 Christmas vacation. Not invited invoice for $8. 100 received. I packaged everything in a plain manila envelope and sent it via certified mail so I would know when they received it. Then I prepared for the aftermath. I set up an automatic reply to my parents' email addresses and phone numbers. I am taking some time for myself and will not be available for communication for the foreseeable future. Please respect my need for space. I temporarily blocked them on social media, not out of spite, but as a boundary to give myself room to process without their presence. I created a folder in my email where any messages from them would automatically be filed, allowing me to choose when and if I wanted to read them. I scheduled extra sessions with my therapist for the coming weeks. I asked my friends to check in on me regularly. I made plans for the weekends, so I wouldn't be sitting alone with my thoughts. I even booked a short solo trip to a bed and breakfast in Michigan for the following month, a way to be kind to myself during what I knew would be a difficult time. Throughout this process, I was surprised by how calm I felt. There was sadness, certainly, and moments of doubt. But underneath it all was a sense of rightness, of finally honoring my own worth after decades of allowing it to be diminished by the people who should have been its fiercest protectors. The night after I mailed my response, I slept better than I had in weeks. Whatever came next, I had spoken my truth. I had refused to participate in my own erasure. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had truly stood up for myself. The storm hit 3 days later. My father called first, leaving a voicemail so angry I could barely make out the words. Completely irresponsible. Family obligations. Selfishness. Ungrateful. I deleted it halfway through. My mother's approach was different, but equally predictable. Her voicemails were tearful, bewildered, hurt. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you, we've always loved you just as much as Marcus. I don't understand why you're being so cruel." Then came the text messages from Marcus, clearly sent at our parents' behest. "Way to make mom cry, Audrey. Real mature." And later, "Dad's blood pressure is through the roof because of your little stunt. Hope you're happy." I didn't respond to any of them. I had said what I needed to say with my $1 check and carefully selected photos. Engaging in their drama would only pull me back into the dysfunctional dynamic I was trying to escape. The extended family soon got involved. My Aunt Diane, my mother's sister, called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart and needed to apologize immediately. My Uncle Robert sent an email with the subject line, "Family comes first," in all caps, lecturing me about respecting my parents. But not everyone took their side. To my surprise, my Aunt Barbara, my father's sister, called to tell me she was proud of me. They did the same thing to me for years, she said. Always favoring your father over me, expecting me to contribute financially while excluding me from decisions. It's why I moved to Arizona and limited contact. I wish I'd had your courage to call it out directly. My cousin Jamie reached out too, apologetic for her role in revealing the Aspen trip but supportive of my response. You know, there's a lot that goes on in this family that nobody talks about, she said cryptically. The way they've treated you isn't right, and more people know it than you might think. The most shocking moment came a week after I sent my response. I was leaving my apartment building for work when I spotted my parents in the lobby. They had flown to Chicago without warning me they were coming. I'm sorry, but those visitors don't have authorization to go up, the security guard informed me, looking uncomfortable. That's correct, I said, grateful for my building's strict security policy. I didn't invite them. My father spotted me and marched over my mother, trailing behind him. His face was flushed with anger. Audrey, he said, his voice low but intense. This has gone far enough. We're going to talk about this like adults. I've said what I needed to say, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. A $1 check, a cryptic note. That's not communication, that's a childish tantrum, he snapped. And an $8.100 invoice for a vacation I wasn't invited to is what exactly I countered. My mother stepped forward, eyes red from crying. We never meant to hurt you, Audrey. We just thought you wouldn't be interested in a ski trip. You've never been athletic like Marcus. The absurdity of her statement actually made me laugh. This isn't about skiing, Mom. This is about a lifetime of being treated as less than. And I'm done accepting it. My father's demeanor shifted to one I recognized well, the businessman making a deal. Look, let's just put this behind us. If the money is really an issue, we can forget about the invoice. The money was never the issue, I said. It was what the invoice represented, that I'm expected to give to this family but not receive. That I'm expected to support Marcus but not be supported myself. That I'm expected to show up for holidays except when you decide I'm not necessary. They continued to alternate between accusations, justifications, and attempts at manipulation. My father threatened to cut me out of their will. My mother cried about how I was tearing the family apart. Neither of them actually listened to what I was saying. After 15 minutes, I ended the conversation. I have to go to work. I've said what I needed to say. If you ever want to have a real conversation about this one where you actually hear me, I'm open to that. But I won't participate in this dynamic anymore. I walked past them and out the door, my heart pounding but my resolve intact. That evening Marcus called. His tone was different from his texts, less aggressive and more conciliatory. Look, Audrey, this has gotten out of hand, he said. Mom's been crying for days. Dad's furious. Can't you just apologize so we can move past this? Apologize for what exactly, I asked. For not wanting to pay for a vacation I wasn't invited to. There was a pause then. About that. I knew you weren't invited. The admission hung in the air between us. You knew, I finally said. Mom and Dad said you were too busy with work to come, but I saw the text you sent Mom asking about flights. I should have said something, but you didn't, I finished for him. Because it benefited you for me to be excluded. That's not fair, he protested, but weakly. Isn't it? You've benefited your entire life from being the favorite. Extra attention, extra support, extra opportunities. Have you ever once stood up for me, Marcus? Have you ever once said, hey, what about Audrey? His silence was answer enough. Before hanging up, he said something that stayed with me. You're not the only one they've done this to, you know. Ask Aunt Barbara sometime about why she really moved across the country. Or Uncle David about why he doesn't come to family gatherings anymore. 2 days later, I received a formal invitation to a family meeting at my grandmother Eleanor's house in Boston. The invitation specified that the purpose was to resolve recent misunderstandings and restore family harmony. It was clearly my grandmother's attempt to mediate the situation. I considered going. My grandmother had always been kind to me, even if she hadn't directly intervened in the family dynamic. But ultimately I declined. In my response I wrote, I'm not ready for a family meeting until there's acknowledgement of the pattern I've identified. Without that, a meeting would only serve to pressure me into accepting the status quo, which I'm no longer willing to do. My grandmother called me personally after receiving my response. "I understand," she said, her voice gentle. "For what it's worth, I've seen it too. I should have said something years ago." Her acknowledgement small, as it was felt like a gift. At least someone in the family was willing to see the truth. 3 weeks after my confrontation with my parents in the lobby of my building, I received a letter from them. It wasn't what I'd call a genuine apology, but it was something. "Dear Audrey, we've had time to reflect on your feelings about family dynamics. While we don't agree with your characterization of events or your method of expressing yourself, we recognize that you feel hurt and overlooked. That was never our intention. We've always loved both our children equally, though perhaps we showed it in different ways based on your different personalities and needs. Marcus required more hands-on support due to his challenges with academics and career direction. You always seemed so self-sufficient that perhaps we didn't realize you needed more from us. If that hurt you, we are sorry. We hope you'll reconsider your current stance and rejoin family activities. The door is open when you're ready. Love, Mom and Dad." It wasn't perfect. It contained justifications and minimized my experience. But it was also the first time they had ever acknowledged, even partially, that they might have hurt me. I decided to take some time before responding to make sure I was acting from a place of clarity rather than hope or hurt. I discussed the letter with Dr. Reynolds in our therapy sessions, which had become focused on establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries with my family. "What would a healthy relationship with your parents look like if it were possible?" she asked me. I had to think about that. One where I'm treated with the same consideration as Marcus, where my achievements are acknowledged, where I'm included in family events without having to earn my place, where I'm not expected to give more than I receive. "Those are reasonable expectations," she affirmed. "The question is whether your parents are capable of meeting them." After careful consideration, I wrote back with specific conditions for moving forward. Acknowledgement of the pattern of favoritism without justifications or excuses. No more financial expectations related to Marcus, equal. Inclusion in family events. Regular one-on-one time with each parent, without Marcus being the main topic of conversation. I made it clear that I wasn't expecting perfection, but I needed to see a genuine effort to change the dynamic. I closed by saying that until I saw evidence of such effort, I would be maintaining limited contact. Over the following months, I kept my word. I reduced communication to brief occasional texts and emails. I declined invitations to family gatherings that seemed designed to pull me back into the old pattern without addressing the underlying issues. The distance was painful, but also liberating. Without the constant disappointment of seeking validation from my parents, I found myself thriving in other areas of my life. My work improved as I channeled my energy into creative projects rather than family drama. My friendships deepened as I became more authentic and less preoccupied with proving my worth. I leaned into creating my own traditions and building my chosen family. For my birthday, Grace organized a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin with our closest friends. For Easter, Lisa and I hosted a brunch that became one of the highlights of my year. When Thanksgiving approached, I decided to stay in Chicago and volunteer at a local shelter before joining friends for dinner, a decision that felt right and true to my values. 6 months after our confrontation, I received a call from my grandmother, Eleanor. We had maintained contact throughout this period, our relationship actually growing stronger without the interference of my parents. "I've been thinking about you, dear," she said, "and there's something I want to share." She proceeded to tell me about her own experience with family favoritism, how her parents had clearly preferred her sister, and how that had shaped her entire life. "I recognize the pattern because I lived it," she said. "I should have protected you from it, and I'm sorry I didn't." Her honesty was healing in a way I hadn't expected. We talked for hours, sharing experiences and insights. She didn't pressure me to reconcile with my parents, but offered perspective and validation that I had desperately needed. Around the 8-month mark, Marcus reached out. His message was surprisingly vulnerable. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened. I never realized how different our experiences in the family were until you laid it out like that. I always saw myself as the one who needed more help, who wasn't as smart or capable as you. I guess I never considered what it cost you to be labeled the self-sufficient one. I'm sorry, Audrey. I should have seen it and said something. We met for coffee during his next visit to Chicago. The conversation was awkward at first, but gradually became more genuine. He shared his own frustrations with our parents' expectations and the pressure he felt to justify their investment in him. I shared what it had been like to achieve in silence, to succeed without celebration. They really messed us both up, didn't they? He said at one point, and we both laughed, a moment of real connection, breaking through years of imposed competition. As the one-year anniversary of my stand approached, I took time to reflect on how far I'd come. The promotion I'd received 3 months earlier felt sweeter because I was doing it for myself, not to prove my worth to my parents. The new relationship I'd begun with Thomas, a kind and supportive man who valued me exactly as I was, felt healthier than any relationship I'd had before. The most unexpected development came in the form of a letter from my mother, arriving almost exactly 1 year after the infamous invoice. Unlike the previous attempts at communication, this one felt different from the first line. My dear Audrey. I've written this letter in my head 100 times, always finding reasons not to send it. Fear, pride, shame, the terrible human instinct to justify rather than simply apologize. But you deserve better than my excuses. The truth is, I failed you as a mother. Not occasionally or accidentally, but consistently and fundamentally. I favored your brother. I minimized your achievements. I took your resilience for granted, while rewarding Marcus's dependence. I excluded you, while expecting you to contribute. These aren't interpretations or misunderstandings. They are facts evidenced by decades of my behavior. There's no justification for any of it. Not your independence, not Marcus's needs, nothing. It was wrong, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry. I don't expect this letter to erase the past or immediately restore your trust. I only hope it might be a first step toward a different kind of relationship, one where you are truly seen and valued as you should have been all along. With love and regret, Mom. I cried when I read it, not from pain, but from the bittersweet recognition that while this was the letter I had always wanted to receive, it had come too late to completely heal the wounds of childhood. Still, it was something real, perhaps the first completely honest communication I'd ever had from my mother. I responded with caution but openness, agreeing to a lunch with just her the next time I visited Chicago. It was a small step but a significant one. The journey isn't over. My father remains largely unchanged, still resistant to acknowledging the pattern or his role in it. My relationship with my parents may never be what I once hoped for. I've come to accept that they may not be capable of giving me what I needed as a child, or even what I would like as an adult. But I've also discovered that my worth isn't determined by their recognition of it. My happiness doesn't depend on their approval. My life is rich with people who see me, value me, and love me authentically. The invoice that once seemed like the ultimate rejection has become, ironically, the catalyst for my liberation. By sending me a bill for a Christmas I wasn't invited to, my parents finally pushed me to stop accepting the unacceptable, to demand more than crumbs from the people who should have given me the whole loaf. If you're in a similar situation, caught in a family dynamic that diminishes you, please know that you deserve better. You deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be included. You deserve to receive as much as you give. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to simply stop participating in your own erasure. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, creating boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for your well-being. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps anyone going through something similar to know they're not alone.